Chapter 56. Xiao Yan and Gu Yu stood quietly on a mountain peak. They looked up at the sky as if they were looking at something. Suddenly, Xiao Yan squinted his eyes and tilted his head to the right. At the same time, he spread his hands in front of his eyes. A few minutes later, Xiao Yan turned his head around. He opened his eyes and looked at the sky. However, he frowned and let out a soft sound of surprise. His eyes swept around, but in the end, he still couldn't find anything. Xiao Yan frowned even more. He then looked at Gu Yu beside him and asked, "Elder Gu, did you see anything?" "Elder Gu, when that white light flashed by earlier, did you see any traces of He Yan?" That's right, in Xiao Yan's sight, there was indeed a white light flashing past. It was this white light that had caused Xiao Yan to turn his head around. He did not see what had happened after that. At least, that was what Xiao Yan had seen. When Gu Yu heard this, he moved his finger under his sleeve. A light flashed across the sky and disappeared into the void. As it was daytime, even Xiao Yan did not notice it. Gu Yu's expression did not change. He looked at Xiao Yan and then at the horizon. He frowned slightly. After a while, he looked at Xiao Yan and shook his head helplessly. Xiao Yan's expression immediately became somewhat worried when he saw this. He muttered softly in his mouth. "How could this be? Even you, Elder Bone, did not notice it?" Gu Yu's expression changed slightly when he heard this. However, he still replied helplessly, "There is no way. There's nothing I can do about it. If my guess is correct, what He Yan encountered earlier should be a spatial storm. In addition to the void divine lightning, I was unable to discover it." "Void divine lightning? Are you talking about the black heavenly lightning?" Gu Yu nodded and continued, "The void divine lightning is in the void. It is equivalent to a sublimated version of the black demon lightning. Like the Dragon Clan, it is not bound by space and has the power to destroy the world. The void divine lightning, together with the shattered void where He Yan fought with it, and the spatial storm, could engulf He Yan without me noticing. However, don't worry. I believe that fellow will be fine. Perhaps he might even obtain some unexpected benefits because of this." Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows when he heard this. After hearing what Gu Yu said, Xiao Yan was no longer worried about He Yan's safety. However, Xiao Yan did not understand the benefits. When Gu Yu saw this, he smiled and left Xiao Yan with a mysterious question mark. In a flash, he entered Xiao Yan's body. "Hey! Elder Gu, don't sleep." Xiao Yan's expression became anxious when he saw this. He hurriedly opened his mouth and said, "What? What's wrong? You little brat, do you have any other strange questions? Can't you finish your question in one go? I can't take so many strange questions." Xiao Yan smiled awkwardly when he heard this. He scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. "Elder Gu, I really don't have any questions this time. However, can you give me the remnant flame art in your hands?" "Oh. Why didn't you say so earlier? Otherwise, I would have given it to you." Xiao Yan felt helpless. This old man had clearly said that Xiao Yan was too weak and had not stabilized his body. Hence, he did not give it to him. However, now that he mentioned it, he was blaming Xiao Yan. Gu Yu casually said. Xiao Yan felt a buzzing sound in his head. His eyes became a little chaotic. Xiao Yan quickly bit the tip of his tongue. The pain instantly spread throughout his body. Xiao Yan quivered and woke up. Xiao Yan's mind shook. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and his eyes were filled with horror. The previous attack had truly frightened Xiao Yan. No wonder Gu Yu said that his foundation was not stable and that he should stabilize his body first. Based on the amount of information that Gu Yu had transmitted, if Xiao Yan's strength had not broken through to the peak of a 2-star half-martial emperor, it was likely that Gu Yu's attack earlier would have been enough to shatter his consciousness. At that time, before Xiao Yan could encounter any danger, he would have been killed by Gu Yu. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged on the ground. His soul power gathered above his head. At this moment, a scarlet fire lotus was in Xiao Yan's mind. It was emitting waves of blazing heat, roasting Xiao Yan's soul power. Xiao Yan's soul power had also surrounded the fire lotus, wrapping it in a soul barrier. He was doing his best to approach the fire lotus, trying to merge it with his body. Chi. A chi-chi sound was heard in Xiao Yan's mind. The soul power surrounding the fire lotus had also scattered a little. This caused Xiao Yan's face to turn red in the span of a couple of breaths. His expression was tense, and the veins on his forehead bulged. Waves of painful roars were emitted from his throat. Xiao Yan clenched his teeth tightly. His face was distorted, and his fists were tightly clenched. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans continued to drip from his forehead. His clothes were completely drenched in sweat. Ugh, I really don't know what to say about you. You ended up like this just to refine a broken chi technique. I am truly helpless against you. Mobilize the heavenly flame in your body. Use the heavenly flame to refine it. I believe that you will finish refining it soon. Hearing this, Xiao Yan did his best to suppress the fire lotus above his head. At the same time, he mobilized the heavenly flame in his body and gathered it above his head. The fire lotus above Xiao Yan's head seemed to have felt the arrival of danger. The scarlet fire lotus continued to spin. Waves of scorching heat waves spread out and collided with the soul barrier. Waves of chi sounds were heard, causing Xiao Yan's entire body to tremble. Forcefully enduring the waves of intense pain that came from his soul, Xiao Yan mobilized all the heavenly flame in his body and gathered it above his head, wrapping the fire lotus within it. The fire lotus that was enveloped by the heavenly flame had clearly become a lot more well-behaved. However, it was still constantly resisting Xiao Yan's control. The peace of the fire lotus also gave Xiao Yan a chance to breathe. Taking a deep breath of the scorching hot air around him, Xiao Yan's mind moved, and the heavenly flame above his head also began to change. Under the control of Xiao Yan's mind, the gorgeous heavenly flame continued to change. It separated, then condensed again, and gradually faded away. The fire lotus also continued to struggle, wanting to escape from this cage. However, the obstruction and burning of the heavenly flame firmly trapped it within, unable to advance or retreat. The change in the situation also caused Xiao Yan to gradually calm down. He wholeheartedly controlled the heavenly flame and approached the trembling fire lotus. The heavenly flame gradually approached the fire lotus, but its temperature was also restrained until it completely enveloped the fire lotus within the heavenly flame. The fire lotus also gradually calmed down during this gentle process, enjoying the closeness of the heavenly flame. Chapter 57. The heavenly flame slowly approached and emitted a warm heat. After nearly 2 hours, the heavenly flame wrapped around the lotus. The fire lotus was finally completely wrapped by the heavenly flame. In fact, the heavenly flame had even merged with it, turning it into a colorful lotus. Under the observation of Xiao Yan's spiritual strength, the fire lotus had become a part of his heavenly flame. The violent fire lotus from before had already disappeared. All that was left was a piece of art that was agglomerated from the heavenly flame, causing one to feel a sense of beauty. The corners of Xiao Yan's mouth curled into a comfortable smile. With a thought, the fire lotus that had merged with the heavenly flame trembled slightly. With a bang, it exploded into countless tiny flaming light spots. The heavenly flame spread out and formed 3 large nets. These nets separated the light spots into 3 parts and refined them separately. Gu Yu did not say anything. He quietly observed Xiao Yan's every action. The seals in Xiao Yan's hands changed. One of the 3 nets turned into a raging flame. It carried the might of burning the sky and boiling the sea as it began to refine it. Although the fire lotus had been scattered, a portion of its original strength was still present. Hence, it continued to struggle within the heavenly flame. This caused the fire lotus fragments in the other 2 nets to begin to struggle. This caused Xiao Yan quite a bit of trouble. Xiao Yan frowned when he saw this. The seals in his hands changed again. The heavenly flame, which was already powerful, swelled once again and completely wrapped the fire lotus fragments within it. The other 2 parts also began to be refined. They did not even have the chance to struggle. Xiao Yan's spiritual strength poured into the nets and completely suppressed the fire lotus fragments within the 3 clusters of heavenly flame. Although there were still some vibrations, they could no longer cause any major commotion. Xiao Yan's refinement was still in progress. He was only waiting for the final refinement to be completed. At this moment, a group of uninvited guests had arrived in Qingyang City. At this moment, 8 figures were standing in the sky above Qingyang City in a black fog. The appearance of the 8 figures immediately alarmed everyone in the Qingyang City. The head of the Lu family, Lu Wabai, and the first elder, Lu Xinqing, also walked out of the clan's great meeting hall. They raised their heads towards the sky and looked at the 8 figures in the distance. Lu Wabai frowned slightly. He was about to step forward when he was stopped by the first elder. Lu Xinqing lightly shook his head and whispered to Lu Wabai. Patriarch, these people's identities are unknown. Just by looking at their attire, they are definitely not good people. It's better not to go. At this point, Lu Xinqing's tone paused slightly, then he lowered his voice and continued. Moreover, these fellows might be here to look for Senior Xiao Yan. Therefore, it's better not to alarm them. Hearing that, Lu Wabai's pupils slightly shrank. He raised his head again and looked at the 8 figures in the sky. He nodded his head and retreated. Just as he was about to take a step back, his expression changed. He turned his head and was about to look behind him when he was stopped by a voice. Don't move. Don't move at all. Otherwise, once those fellows make a move, it won't be a joke. After those words were spoken, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing both trembled. The expressions on their faces were immediately replaced by shock. Because, from the voice, they could tell that the owner of the voice was right behind them. Perhaps as long as they moved slightly, they would touch him. But they had never sensed him at such a close distance before. This made the two of them a bit nervous. That person seemed to have sensed this as well. He lightly snorted and said in a low voice. You've been with me every day and you don't seem to be afraid of me. But now that I've appeared, you're scared to this extent. I really don't know how you live. Hearing that, the two of them frowned. Immediately after, they seemed to have thought of something. They looked at each other and Lu Wabai asked in a low voice. Senior, do you know these people? That person lightly sighed. He frowned as he looked at the 8 black figures in the sky and said in a low voice, right now, I don't know them. However, if we talk about the future, I think I'll know them. These people are indeed very troublesome. He and I still don't completely understand the reason for this matter. So, for the time being, we can only avoid them. However, it's only a matter of time before we meet them. Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing nodded in confusion. They didn't continue to ask and continued to watch. In the sky, a figure shrouded in black fog was bowing and reporting something to the person at the front of the group. Third Palace Master, there is indeed Xiao Yan's aura here. However, due to Xiao Yan intentionally erasing it, it's already very difficult to determine his exact location. I can only conclude that Xiao Yan has already left this Azure Sun City. Hearing that, the person who was called the Third Palace Master coldly snorted. His hoarse voice slowly spat out a sentence. Humph. Trash. Since there isn't any, you actually stayed here to investigate for so long. If you let that Xiao Yan escape, I will definitely kill you. The person who spoke just now was the old flame demon ghost. At this moment, the old flame demon ghost's face was filled with respect. He did not dare to relax in the slightest. However, from his respectful eyes, one could faintly see the deeply buried hatred. The Third Palace Master swept his gaze over the Azure Sun City below. He frowned slightly but still did not do anything. He glared at the old flame demon ghost who was standing at the side without moving. He coldly snorted and waved his sleeves. He turned around and flew out of the city. Before he left, he spat out another sentence from his mouth. What are you standing there for? Which direction did he go? Quickly lead the way for me. Otherwise, I will slap you to death right now. Hearing that, the old flame demon ghost was so angry that his face trembled. He glared at the Third Palace Master who had turned around and left. He responded and quickly flew in front to lead the way. After the few people in the sky left, the people in the city finally caught their breaths. They guessed at each other's intentions. There were also some people who were afraid of attracting trouble and hurriedly left. Lu Mansion. Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing turned around. What entered their eyes was a young man wearing snow-white clothes. He held a Buddhist jade fan in his hand. As he opened and closed it, waves of pill fragrance were emitted, refreshing one's mind. Seeing this, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing did not dare to slight him in the slightest. They hurriedly bowed and greeted. Greetings to Elder. The young man opened the jade fan in his hand and gently fanned it. He helped the two of them up. After which, he opened his mouth and said with a smile. Haha, no need to be so polite. I don't care about such etiquette. The two of you don't need to be so reserved. Feel free to do as you wish. Hearing this, the two of them hurriedly waved their hands and refused. However, under the other party's forceful request, they slowly relaxed. However, it was still possible to see that the two of them were not as relaxed as they appeared to be. May I know if Elder has any mission for me since you have appeared today? The atmosphere relaxed. Lu Wabai also gathered his courage and asked a question that he should not have taken the initiative to ask. Hearing this, the man smiled and shook his head. No. It's only because of those few people who are neither human nor ghost. If not, I would rather return to my original body. Without waiting for the two of them to react, the man immediately opened his mouth and said. Also, in the future, don't call me Elder. It sounds like I'm very old. I have a name. It's called Bai Hua. In the future, you can call me by my name. If you really can't, you can also call me Big Brother Bai. There's no need to call me Elder. Hearing this, the two of them looked at each other. Their faces were filled with helplessness. Immediately after, they looked at Bai Hua and nodded their heads. They did not say anything else. Chapter 58. Merge. The seals in Xiao Yan's hands changed as he cried out loudly in his heart. Immediately, the seals in his hands suddenly solidified and controlled the circulation of the heavenly flame in his body. The heavenly flame in his body followed some of the channels that it had never traveled before and finally returned to the root of the flame mantra chi method. After that, for some unknown reason, it once again deviated from the root of the flame mantra chi method. But even so, according to common sense, the discomfort in the body caused by the circulation of the chi method and the reversal of vital energy did not occur. It was indeed incomparably strange. Of course, this only applied to those who did not know. Xiao Yan would naturally not feel strange about this. The heavenly flame followed the new chi method route and slowly circulated, nourishing the channels. Xiao Yan also tried his best to familiarize himself with this chi method route that was a little longer than the original one. He slowly circulated the dou qi in his body and circulated it along this somewhat unfamiliar route. After a couple of hours of refining and merging, this portion of the flame mantra chi method had already been completely refined by Xiao Yan. Although it was still a little raw, it was more or less completely merged with the flame mantra that Xiao Yan practiced. So much so that when Xiao Yan circulated it, his heart felt even smoother and smoother. The circulation and condensation of his dou qi became even faster. This also caused Xiao Yan to feel quite happy in his heart. Qi methods were the foundation of cultivation. With a good qi method, one's cultivation would naturally be even faster. The rise of one's cultivation would naturally be even faster and more solid. In this way, one would naturally have more confidence when facing enemies in the future. Haha, not bad. To be able to completely merge and refine it in such a short period of time, it can be considered not bad. According to the current circulation speed and cultivation speed of the flame mantra, it has indeed reached the level of a human class chi method. But unfortunately, this chi method is not complete. Therefore, it looks like you still need some time to get used to it. Xiao Yan nodded and smiled but did not say anything. He would do whatever the Tushi ancient emperor arranged. Although he, Xiao Yan, was not the kind of person who would be manipulated by others, the Tushi ancient emperor would definitely not harm him. Moreover, he did indeed need strength now. With the Tushi ancient emperor paving the road for him, it would indeed allow him to avoid many detours. The two of them chatted for a while before Xiao Yan entered his training mode and began to train. The next day. On the top of the mountain, a ray of morning light shot from the horizon and shone on Xiao Yan's delicate and handsome face. Xiao Yan's closed eyes slowly opened and he exited his training mode. He narrowed his eyes and watched the dawn on the horizon. A few days later, 8 figures stood at the peak of the mountain. After probing for a while, one of them nodded and said respectfully to the person beside him, "That's right, brotherly." Reporting to Third Hall Chief, this is the place where Xiao Yan had stayed. If I'm not wrong, he should have only left this place for a couple of days. With our speed, it is likely that we will catch up to him soon. The third palace master nodded when he heard this. He looked at the direction Xiao Yan left in and pondered for a while before opening his mouth. This direction is towards the savage ancient city. Xiao Yan is leaving the southern region. The third palace master paused for a while before letting out a cold laugh. You think you will be fine after leaving the southern region? Humph humph. The third palace master lifted his right hand gently before waving it down heavily. At the same time, he shouted. Let's go. We must catch up with Xiao Yan within 3 days and not let him leave the southern region. Everyone responded. After which, they flew in the direction that Xiao Yan had left in. 2 days later, in Desolation City. Xiao Yan sat at a table by the window on the second floor of a restaurant. He looked at the human flow below and took a sip of the tea in his hand. He smiled and got up to leave. Gu Yu's voice was suddenly heard, causing Xiao Yan to frown involuntarily. He sat down again. Wait, I think there is no need for you to leave. There should be a good show to watch in a while. Xiao Yan frowned and asked Gu Yu in his heart. Old Gu, what do you mean? Haha, I think the group you are waiting for has arrived. I can sense that there are 8 half-emperor level fellows heading over from the direction you came from. I think it won't be long before we reach this place. Xiao Yan frowned when he heard this. He lifted his eyes to look at the distant sky outside the window and asked faintly. Old Gu, what are their strengths like? Haha, it looks like they are determined to take you down. The moment these words were uttered, Xiao Yan's expression immediately became solemn. However, he still continued to quietly listen. Their overall strength is indeed quite a bit of pressure for you. The strongest among them is a 7-star half-emperor. Next are 2 4-star half-emperors and 5 1-star half-emperors. Xiao Yan did not say anything. He nodded silently to show that he understood. Then, his figure moved and disappeared from the restaurant. In the next moment, a white-clothed figure suddenly appeared in the sky. Everyone on the ground raised their heads to look at the sky with curiosity on their faces. Xiao Yan had his hands behind his back. His eyes were closed and his face was expressionless. He stood quietly in the sky, waiting for their arrival. After a while, a few faintly discernible black dots appeared in the distant sky before everyone's eyes. In a short moment, they arrived within 100 feet of Xiao Yan. TSK, 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 TSK. Xiao Yan, I've heard of your name like thunder. Do you know how many people we've sent out to wait for you? We've waited bitterly for 10 years. Now, you've finally appeared. Xiao Yan frowned and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes narrowed into black lines as he looked at the person who spoke. However, he still smiled and asked. Waiting for me? Haha, I've never met any of you before. Why would you wait for me to say such a thing? TSK, 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 TSK. It looks like Sir Xiao Yan still doesn't understand many things. In that case, Sir Xiao Yan, please return with us. My master will personally explain it to you. I'm sure Sir Xiao Yan will understand the reason behind this. Xiao Yan's lips curled upwards when he heard that. He let out a mocking laugh and said with a mocking expression in his eyes, haha, haha. I'm sorry. I like to be with people. I really can't get along with people like you who are neither human nor ghost. The eyes of the third hall chief suddenly became sharp when he heard this. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Xiao Yan. It was a long while later before he slowly opened his mouth and said. After a while, he slowly said, it looks like you don't want to come with us. In that case, don't blame me for being rude. All of you, attack. As long as you don't let him die, nothing else matters. Before the third hall master finished speaking, the 7 people behind him moved and charged toward Xiao Yan. A great battle was about to break out. Chapter 59. Xiao Yan looked at the 7 clusters of black fog surrounding him and frowned. A grave expression flashed across his face. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes. He looked at the third hall master again and said. There doesn't seem to be any enmity between us. Moreover, this is also my first time here. Although I injured the old flame demon ghost that day, I didn't do anything to him. Hearing this, the old flame demon ghost's expression instantly became ferocious. His eyes looked at Xiao Yan as if they were about to spit fire. Humph. Xiao Yan, if you didn't sneak attack me, how could I have been injured by you? Xiao Yan. Take a palm from me. Before his voice sounded, the old flame demon ghost was already anxious. Without waiting for the third hall master's order, he let out an explosive cry. His body moved and he threw a palm at Xiao Yan. Seeing this, Xiao Yan's face revealed a cold smile. His right arm was waved in front of him. Following which, his hand suddenly clenched into a fist. At the same time, the heavenly flame in his body surged out from the surface of his body and covered his entire body. At this moment, Xiao Yan appeared to have completely turned into a colorful and gorgeous fire person. Being enveloped by the heavenly flame, Xiao Yan slowly raised his head. A pair of bright eyes slightly brightened and a bright light flashed through them. Xiao Yan suddenly waved his right arm. His body shook and he charged toward the old flame demon ghost. Boom! An enormous wave of fire swept across the sky and blocked everyone's line of sight. The third hall master's expression also changed slightly. Under the black fog, a pair of sinister eyes emitted bits of pitch-black light. This Xiao Yan actually managed to raise his strength to the peak of a 2-star half-martial emperor in a short 2 months. This is truly astonishing. If it is only because of his bloodline awakening, then this Xiao Yan is truly extraordinary. From the looks of it, this Xiao Yan cannot be left alive. This time around, I must take him down. A bloodthirsty glint flashed across the third hall master's eyes as this thought flashed across his mind. Just as the third hall master was about to make a move, his expression changed again. With a wave of his sleeve, a black energy shot out. Then, another explosion was heard. The sound was accompanied by a miserable cry. The old flame demon ghost's figure appeared below the fire wave. Humph. Trash. The third hall master snorted coldly without turning his head. Immediately, his eyes became stern and the fire wave in front of the third hall master was directly separated. The wave of fire broke apart, revealing Xiao Yan's figure. Xiao Yan turned around and met the third palace master's gaze. At the point where their eyes met, a burst of fiery light flashed. Then, Xiao Yan's body suddenly trembled and he took 3 steps back. The third hall chief coldly laughed. His body moved and a fist smashed toward Xiao Yan. Wherever the punch passed, the wind from the punch whistled. The space around the third hall master shattered with a loud bang, revealing a large patch of pitch-black void space. Wherever the third hall master passed, the space turned into a vacuum. It took a while before it slowly recovered. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in reality, it only took an instant. An instant was enough for Xiao Yan to do a lot of things. However, at this moment, Xiao Yan felt powerless. Xiao Yan's face was grave. A 7-star half-martial emperor was indeed not someone he could easily defeat. The gap between the two of them was still too big. The space around him had already been locked down. It was impossible for him to dodge. Xiao Yan looked at the punch that was getting closer and closer. His expression became firm. With a thought, the dragon phoenix bloodline in his body was stimulated. Golden dragon scales instantly covered his entire body. His body trembled. He stepped on the void and instantly charged toward the third hall master. Yellow spring palm. Xiao Yan let out an explosive shout. Do Qi rapidly condensed in his heart and met the third hall master's fierce punch head-on. Boom. A loud sound was emitted. A wave of wild and violent energy swept through the world, completely destroying the wave of fire that had yet to disperse. In the sky, the third hall master's figure was like a crane standing in the sky. As for Xiao Yan, he was blasted several hundred feet away by the explosion. In the end, with an explosive sound, he was forcibly embedded into a huge mountain. Even so, the third hall master, who was standing upright in the air, still frowned slightly. A look of astonishment flashed across his eyes, and he could not help but mutter in a low voice, "That's right." He couldn't help but mutter, "I never imagined that Xiao Yan's physical body would be this frightening. Even with 30% of my strength as a 7-star half-martial emperor, I was still unable to cripple his arm. This is truly chilling. Chilling." However, immediately after, the third hall master's eyes once again turned ice-cold. He looked at the huge mountain that Xiao Yan had crashed into. The third hall master's hands once again clenched into fists. Creaking sounds were emitted. The old and dark yellow skin on his knuckles was also suffused with bits of white. Immediately after, the third hall master's figure flashed. He disappeared along with the black fog that lingered around his body. At the same time, a gust of cold wind blew in the sky for no reason. The cold wind blew and formed several whirlwinds. They brought about whistling wind howls as they spiraled around the crowd. It was quite strange. In the next instant, the third hall master, who was originally rushing toward Xiao Yan, suddenly let out a furious roar. Roar. Xiao Yan. You actually dared to toy with me. You are simply courting death. Today, I will definitely skin you alive and pull out your tendons. The third hall master's eyes were scarlet red as he turned around. He was so angry that his face twitched incessantly. The aura from his body suddenly soared, causing the black fog around him to ripple like waves of water. What he did not expect was that Xiao Yan was actually able to silently disappear before his eyes under the cover of his 7-star half-martial emperor's strength. This caused him, a 7-star half-martial emperor who had been in a high position for a long time, to inevitably feel humiliated in his heart. A cold wind blew past. Immediately after, a white-clothed figure appeared in the sky. He looked at the third hall master with a sneer on his face. The third hall master's face twitched. He completely immobilized the Do Qi within his body. His figure flashed and appeared before Xiao Yan. He threw a punch toward Xiao Yan. Seeing this, Xiao Yan's face was filled with shock. He leaned back slightly and spread his arms. With the sound of wind blowing under his feet, his figure flashed and disappeared from where he stood. Unfortunately, even though Xiao Yan's reaction was already very fast, the third hall master's punch still left a shallow imprint on Xiao Yan's chest. Xiao Yan's figure flashed and appeared 100 feet away. PFFF. Xiao Yan opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood with a flushed face. Immediately after, he looked at his chest. There was a palm-sized bloody imprint there. Xiao Yan's face twitched slightly. He thought in a somewhat serious manner. The strength of a 7-star half-martial emperor is indeed not to be underestimated. If it wasn't for my quick reaction, I'm afraid that the punch just now would have been enough to seriously injure me and make me lose the ability to fight. As Xiao Yan thought in his heart, he felt a chill run down his back. A 7-star half-martial emperor was indeed not someone he could contend against. He could not even receive a single punch from him. What could he use to fight to the death with him? Haha, what's wrong? You're not confident anymore? Don't you still have a human-ranked Do skill? Are you still afraid of him? Chapter 60. Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows when he heard this. He frowned a little in surprise. He glanced at the third hall master in the distance and asked Guyu in his heart. Old Gu, I can understand why you say that I have a man-class Do technique. You have said in the Serene Bone Palace that the strength of the Angry Buddha reincarnation has already reached the level of a man-class Do technique. However, does this have anything to do with you being afraid of the third hall master? Or do you want me to rely on a man-class Do technique to fight with a 7-star Ban Emperor? Guyu choked when this question appeared in Xiao Yan's heart. He coughed a couple of times before slowly coming to a stop. Stop. Xiao Yan seemed to have realized that he had misunderstood, but he did not continue to ask. This was because he knew that Guyu would tell him the answer. As expected, Guyu finally opened his mouth a moment later. You. If it weren't for the fact that this old man is here to hear you say these words, I'm afraid that even a random person would be angered to the point of smoke coming out of their 7 orifices after hearing you say such unbearable words. Xiao Yan blinked his eyes. It seemed that he had sensed that this man-class Do technique was not ordinary. However, he continued to look at the third hall master with a calm expression. Xiao Yan relaxed when he saw that the third hall master was looking at him with a doubtful expression. Although a man-class Do technique is the lowest class among the Tian-class Do techniques, the development of a man-class Do technique is the most immeasurable among the Tian-class Do techniques. As for the Tian-class Do techniques, this was only a general term. A man-class 4 Spirit Saint was called a Tian-class Do technique. The Tian-class 4 Spirit Saint was called a Tian-class Do technique. The Tian-class 4 Spirit Saint was called a D-class Do technique. This was also a classification of the Do techniques mastered by each individual. It was very ordinary. As for the development of a man-class Do technique, it was because a man-class Do technique was the easiest to practice and also the easiest to comprehend among the Tian-class Do techniques. When a man-class Do technique was practiced to a high level, there would be an illusionary image of the person who created it. This would allow the practitioner to control it more easily. It was also because of this illusory figure that a practitioner was able to have the opportunity to comprehend the profoundness within it and raise the foundation of the Do technique. There was even the opportunity to create a Ling-class Do technique. The strength of a man-class Do technique is naturally incomparably powerful. Let's use you as an example. If you were to use a man-class Do technique to deal with this third hall master, you would be able to seriously injure him in one move. You should also understand that the man-class Do technique is not so simple. Moreover, that man-class Do technique of yours is something that you created yourself. From this point of view, its strength should be a little stronger. So, you can be at ease and go. The words were extremely long. However, from the point of view of Xiao Yan and the third hall chief, only a couple of breaths had passed. When Xiao Yan heard this, his heart was greatly stirred. He took a deep breath and was about to step forward and fight a few more rounds with the third hall master. However, his expression changed in the next instant. He held his chest with his hand and violently coughed a couple of times. Xiao Yan spat out a mouthful of blood that remained in his mouth. He sensed the faint scent of blood that was transmitted from his nose. His heart involuntarily felt somewhat bitter. The speed of this third hall master was clearly above his. The first condition for Xiao Yan to use the Angry Buddha reincarnation was that he needed sufficient time. However, in the current situation, it could be said that Xiao Yan did not have sufficient time to use the Angry Buddha reincarnation. Although Xiao Yan had the help of the Sky Extinction Step, he had yet to master the Sky Extinction Step. Even if he used all his strength, his speed would at the very most be on par with the third hall master. In this way, in addition to the old flame demon ghost and the others watching from the side, it was likely that he would not have the opportunity to use the Angry Buddha reincarnation. When Xiao Yan thought of this in his heart, his brows were tightly knit together. Both of his eyes swept all around him, searching for a way to escape. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Yan made up his mind. Since there was no other way to survive, he could only force his way out. Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly turned cold. The third hall master raised his brows slightly and let out a cold laugh. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at Xiao Yan with eyes filled with disdain. Xiao Yan's body moved. A whirlwind was formed under his feet as he silently disappeared into the void. The third hall master let out a cold laugh. Both of his fists were tightly clenched. His body moved and appeared at a certain spot in the void. He waved his huge fist, which carried the power of a burning wind, and violently struck the space in front of him. Bang! A muffled sound was emitted. The third hall master frowned slightly under his mask. Immediately, it turned into a cold snort. His body moved and once again rushed out in a flash. At this moment, Xiao Yan's expression was incomparably solemn. He was fully focused on using the sky extinction step to dodge in all directions. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. Every time the third hall master flashed, a muffled sound would be emitted in the air. Sometimes, it would also be accompanied by a muffled snort. However, there was no trace of that person. This also caused the people in the city below to click their tongues in amazement. A moment later, in the sky, a tattered figure with blood at the corner of his mouth and bruises on his body finally came to a stop. Xiao Yan's mouth was panting heavily. The skin at the corner of his eyes was trembling. Xiao Yan glanced at his tattered clothes before parting his mouth to look at the third hall chief. A cold laugh was emitted from his mouth. In the short exchange just now, the third hall master had thrown out a total of nearly 100 punches. However, there were only a dozen bruises on Xiao Yan's body. Although his clothes were a little tattered, the injuries on Xiao Yan's body were much fewer. On the other hand, Xiao Yan also realized that under such a close pursuit, his control of the sky extinction step was getting better and better. This was indeed good news for Xiao Yan. When the third hall master saw Xiao Yan's mocking smile just now, the anger in his heart soared. His fists were once again tightly clenched as his mouth let out an explosive roar. Roar! The few of you, attack together. Today, I will definitely cripple you. When the 7 people heard this, with the flame demon old ghost in the lead, their bodies moved. As the seals in their hands changed, a loud explosive roar was emitted from their mouths as they violently attacked Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan frowned. However, he did not panic. His footwork changed as he twisted at a strange angle. His body suddenly moved and once again disappeared in the sky. At this moment, the attacks of the 7 people had already arrived in front of him. Unfortunately, Xiao Yan's body had already disappeared without a trace. Boom! After throwing out a punch, the third hall master's body appeared 1,000 feet away from the 7 people. However, what welcomed him was a thick and heavy black ruler. At this moment, this huge ruler had already been forcefully blasted into a 3-inch deep groove by the third hall master's wild and violent punch. Around the groove, there were also some densely packed cracks.